Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another Tactical Tuesday. It's Tuesday again, so let's talk about some 40k. We got a lot of good stuff coming down the pipeline over the next week or so, generally, especially with the new Warzone Nachtmund updates happening to the game. And I'd like to talk about that. I also I played a tournament this weekend with some Crusher Stampede stuff I'm pretty excited to talk about, so we'll go ahead and go through that. We'll start with a little bit of a tournament report, but first off, I do want to give a big thanks to GameMat.eu. If you just tuned in, then you probably saw a little trailer that I made. They were nice enough, you can kind of see in the background here a little bit, to send me a table full of terrain and game mats and stuff like that, and that will be going to good use with some in-person live streaming. We were hoping to do a test stream this weekend. Unfortunately, this week, that got postponed, and with LVO, a lot of the, at least players in my area, traveling around this week, things are a little bit awkward, so I don't know if we're going to be able to do it this week. I'm hoping that we will have an in-person live stream for everybody next week. That would be great. But yeah, that's going to be the plan. I am noticing that it looks like my chat is not working in the stream. Let me see if I can fix that real quick, chat. I do apologize for that. I'm gonna click this button. Hope everyone's doing well, by the way. Hope everyone had a good weekend. Okay, well, this should be my chat box. It's not showing anybody's chat. Oh, that's okay. Well, at least we have it in the YouTube playback. So if you're on the playback, then you should see the chat there. But for some reason, it's not showing up on my stream. So I apologize, everybody, for that. That's too bad. But let's talk about some stuff. Also, if you haven't noticed, we've been doing a lot of streaming on the channel over the last couple weeks. That's because the T5S2 Invitational is currently going on. It's a big, long event. We have a 6-month biannual T5S2 season, which is our online 40k league. That it's a global series, so it takes scores. It's kind of like ITC. It takes scores from everywhere, all over the globe. All of the online events in 40k, almost all of them get ranked in T5S2. And then every 6 months, we run an invitational with the top 16 players from that current season. So that's what's going on right now. We're doing a group stage. Those 16 players are going to get cut down to 8. And then the weekend of February 12th and 13th, they're gonna fight it out in a top 8 elimination 3-round event. So that's very exciting. If you haven't tuned into those games, you have some super duper good games of Warhammer 40k happening. Both streamed to Twitch at twitch.tv/tacticaltortoisetv, and then we're also multi-streaming to the YouTube. So if you've seen those on YouTube, then that's what that is. That's what's going on. We're also going to be doing some giveaways. So in lieu of a regular giveaway for January, we've been giving away a bunch of stuff over on the streams. We've given away a couple sets of objective markers so far. I've got some Orc kits to give away. I've got some Black Templars kits to give away. I got some Imperial Guard kits to give away. I got a bunch of stuff to give to people. So tune into those T5S2 streams for your chance to win. If you are a patron, as always, you'll be entered automatically. And then you can enter the normal way, obviously, also. And generally, we are also giving additional entries to people who gift subs or memberships on Twitch or YouTube, depending on where you're watching. So that's happening right now, and it's super cool. But we're talking about some in-person 40k today, everybody in chat, because I played a pretty zany Crusher Stampede list over the weekend. I went to a local tournament. It was a charity tournament for a community member who was in need, had some medical issues, unfortunately. And the local gaming club at a game store that I don't normally frequent, but it is actually one of the first ones I played 40k at when I got started back in 2019. And they pulled together and raised a bunch of money. We raised, I think, just over $1,000 for this individual, which was super good over the course of this weekend. It was just a 3-round event, regular old GT 2021, 2,000 point event. But there was a twist, which was that you could donate the money to get additional essentially faux CP rerolls. So it was an additional use of the command reroll stratagem that didn't cost you CP and didn't count against your initial use of the command reroll stratagem, which meant you could potentially reroll 2 things every phase. So you could be dropping a boatload of cash on rerolling your dice. And that meant some funny things happened in the tournament, which we'll definitely talk about, which is super fun. I love that those kind of, fun additional benefits that you can get for these charity events. And I think everyone was very much in the spirit of things and throwing money down to help people out and to try to make silly things happen in their game of 40k, which was pretty sweet. We'll talk about my list first up here. Exclamation point list in chat, everyone. If you want to take a look at it yourself, that'll get you a link to the list. But it's pretty straightforward. I took, given that it was a charity event, I took a little bit less of a serious list than I would normally take. It was Crusher Stampede, and that's largely because I did buy 2 Dimachaerons when Crusher Stampede came out, which I was very excited to use. Almost immediately, of course, the Tau Railgun was previewed, and I was like, uh-oh, this might have been a premature purchase. And then, literally, as I was painting these guys for use in the event, the spoilers from the Knockmoon chapter approved come out. For those who haven't seen them yet, a lot of good things for Tyranids. Hiveguard got hit a little bit, up 5 points, back up to 50 from where they were, which was like totally understandable. They got a points reduction last year. Why? Why did they do that? They didn't need a reduction. 50 points was fine per model, and they're just back up to 50 now, which I think is totally appropriate. Haraspexes are down. Haraspexes and Exocrines both down. Exocrines sort of getting hammered by just damage reduction, man. Just makes that thing really sad. And being down to 155 points for the Exocrine makes it much better. Haraspex, I think there's still some problems with that chassis, but it's definitely, I mean, if you want to dump like 4 CP in a turn to make him do a bunch of stuff, like, you pay a little bit less for it. I don't know. That seems fine. But the big one was Dimachaerons went up 25 points. They went up to 280 points, which, in my opinion, I've been kind of vocal about my disdain for the Dimachaeron chassis in the past, and I think that was sort of unwarranted. I think, or I guess I should rephrase. I think hitting the Dimachaeron specifically was a little silly. If you wanted to, it was weird that Dimachaerons were targeted, I guess. I don't think Dimachaerons are the best of the trio of 18 wounder big monsters that Tyranids have, those being the barbed and Scythe Tyraduel, and then the Dimachaeron itself. Scythe Tyraduels, so far in Crusher Stampede, at least in my experience, have come out just leagues ahead of where Dimachaeron is. Dimachaerons are kind of more of a toolbox monster. The big thing that they give you is the ability to jump over walls. But their other abilities, especially in Crusher Stampede, are kind of overshadowed. Like, they have an invulnerable save, but they already have an invulnerable save, so it doesn't do anything. Thorax Spine Maw is not really that big of a deal, because most of the time your opponent plays around it. And they have a tail attack, like, that's it. So you're basically trading the super good gun that Hierodules have for the ability to jump over walls, which I think, to be fair, is a relatively fair trade, because the Hierodual gun is insane, especially in a list like Crusher Stampede, which sometimes can have trouble fighting a lot of infantry. And that thing shoots 3d6 flamer shots, and that's like friggin' super good. The downside is that, unlike the Hierodual, Dimachaeron it can't be obscured, obviously, which the Hierodual obviously can't, but it's only toughness 7, which means that the Maliceptor Encephalic Fusion doesn't work very well on it, because you want even toughness values for the Maliceptor. Toughness 8 is like the sweet spot for that aura to be super powerful. Toughness 7, you will often find it's not very useful unless your opponent has very specific profiles. And that just means that it mostly, like, against any reasonable gun line, they will just be immediately vaporized. If you have good terrain and you're playing with a lot of very opaque pieces of terrain, so you're not as worried about the obscuring keyword, I think Dimachaeron's stock goes up pretty significantly because you can actually hide them. But if you don't have great terrain, and as we'll see, the terrain in this particular event, which is fine because it was a casual event, was a little bit open. So I wasn't super confident in these Dimachaeron's ability to survive, but we saw how it was. But I don't think that Dimachaerons were head and shoulders above anything else in the faction, especially compared to Scythe Tyraduels. And I was just flabbergasted that Dimachaeron specifically got this nerf hammer. I don't know. It's weird. We'll see how it goes. The other thing that, in general, for Crusher Stampede, the thing is going to hurt is the release of the Tau Codex. I think that's probably, if anything, yeah, I will still probably play a single Dimacharon in a lot of Crusher Stampede lists just for the ability to jump over walls if I need to. But I think the release of the Tau Codex probably kills all of those archetypes of Crusher Stampede that have unobscurable models in them, because if you are going second against a Tau list, or even if you're going first and they just deploy super defensively, they will just immediately kill all of your monsters. And you're like, well, this sucks. So, I don't know. We'll see how that matchup ends up playing up when the Tau Codex comes out, but it looks like it's going to be super toxic for these big, powerful vehicles and monsters and stuff like that, which is, it's probably okay. You can still fall back on Hive Guard and Gene Stealers and all that stuff, but we'll have to see how it plays out. But anyway, that's a really long preamble to me talking about how I played 2 Dimachaerons at this tournament, because I thought it would be fun. I also played a Trigon Prime because I wanted to score some style points. So I played a single battalion detachment. Obviously, it's Hive Fleet Leviathan. Obviously, it's in a Crusher Stampede. We took 2 Hive Tyrants because I think they're rad. One of them was souped up to be the Super Smashy Hive Tyrant. So 2 monster Scything Talons with murderous size. He's got all the upgrades, Toxin Sacs, Adrenal Glands, all that stuff. Alongside a Rampaging Beast for the extra D3 attacks when he comes in. I have a second Hive Tyrant, and also Biomorphic Carapace on him, so he's -1 to be wounded. That makes him very tanky once you start stacking buffs on him. I have a second Hive Tyrant. That guy has the Adaptive Neural Lobe. I would kind of rather have Resonance Barb, especially on a Hive Tyrant, because it affects you. It gives you an additional cast, so you can cast 3 times, and all of them are at +1, and they're usually pretty good at delivering those 2 denies that Resonance Barb gives you. But the downside is that I think Crusher Stampede is super starved for command points, since a lot of the super powerful benefits of the Crusher Stampede are that they're all super good stratagems. And so I have found that Adaptive Neural Lobe ends up, I think, being more valuable. I super miss my poor Resonance Barb Hive Tyrant, but it's nice to have a good place to put that. And having another Hive Tyrant in the list is always good, because you can deliver breaking throughs wherever you need to, or just run that guy onto objectives and do stuff like that. I got 3 units of Tyranid Warriors. 2 of them are just 3-mans with bioweapon bonds to sit in the back and give people +1 to hit. One of them is a 5-man with Adrenal Glands. All of them have Scything Talons. The 5-man's just there because I had an awkward number of points remaining. But also, 5-man Tyranid Warriors. You can -1 damage them. It is 2 CP transhuman. Unfortunately, until one of them dies, because they're 5 models at the start, which isn't great, but they're kind of difficult to remove, so they can kind of run up and do something, or they can body block for the Hive Guard if you need to. That also works. I have the 6 Hive Guard, obviously, 1 Lictor, as long as we get the Lictor for like another week, as long to score Retrieve Octaria's data. So this was very much a last hurrah kind of list where I got to do some Octaria's data retrieval with the Lictor, as well as a unit of Venom Throbes. That was my one concession to try to keep the Dimachaerons alive on turn 1, was the Venom Throbes. Obviously, if your opponent has indirect fire, they will probably just kill those guys, and then it won't really matter that much. But you can transhuman them for 1, which can make, like, if they have a 1-shot indirect fire gun, sometimes you can fade it because they also have the invulnerable save, and they themselves are also -1 to hit. So sometimes you can make it a little bit awkward for them to kill that 1 Venom Thrope to make them not affect monsters anymore. But at the very least, if your opponent doesn't have a lot of indirect fire, you can hide them behind obscuring terrain and then put the Dimachaerons in front of the obscuring terrain, and they'll get the -1, and that's just fine. And then a Trigon Prime. He's been upgraded with Murderous Size. I also I had 3 bioweapon bonds in the list originally, but generally, because I have so many Hive Tyrants, I haven't really found that I need the extra bioweapon bonds, because everyone's like 2+ weapon scale for the most part. So I actually put the feed synaptic link on him for fallback and shoot and charge, which I thought occasionally could be pretty good. Mostly there for the memes, but we did it. Here's the majority of the list here. My big Dimachaerons, which I assembled this week, not entirely painted quite yet. I'm not sure if they will ever be painted, unfortunately. Poor souls. This Trigon is busy stretching because it hasn't seen the tabletop in probably 6 years. So it's very exciting. He's very excited to be to see the table one more time. And then the remainder of the bunker. There's not pictures of another unit of warriors and a Hive Tyrant that were deployed elsewhere in this particular game. But I was pretty psyched to play the list. I was excited to play the Trigon. I was excited to play the Dimachaerons. And once I looked at the the other lists that were in attendance, of which there were a lot, it ended up being, I think, a 22-person event, which is relatively big. There were a lot of people kind of taking it more seriously than I anticipated. So there was at least a few Adeptus Mechanicus, which I knew I had to dodge. We had to skillfully dodge the Adeptus Mechanicus because they would immediately kill me. There was also a couple Grey Knights that I was a little bit worried about. That's been a tough matchup for Crusher Stampede generally because they have a lot of smites and mortal wounds, and then the Tide of Convergence mortal wounds. Even though you can damage reduce a lot of their incoming damage, the mortal wounds just pile up and eventually chew through the monsters. So that's been a very tough matchup in my experience. And then there were a couple sort of Space Marine gun lines, like Melta Heavy gun lines, and a couple Sisters of Battle as well that I was pretty worried about hitting. So I didn't feel, I felt like I was maybe a little under the curve. But we just had to dodge our bad matchups. Plan dodge was absolutely in effect. So we got there. My first round, I was paired up against Harlequins. This was on Scorched Earth, so we had the objectives in the corners of our deployment zone here, and then the two, you can't really see them because we use the regular token. There are two objectives kind of nestled below the gantries here, which were the additional, the center table line objectives. And this was a very interesting, let's see if I have some good pictures of my opponent's army. Yeah, here we go. This is a super fun conversion that my opponent did for his army. It's a looted Mixed Eldari army, so he had all of his Harlequins were like orcs and goblins and stuff like that. He had a lot of Dark Eldar models that were kind of decked out in a lot of orc stuff, and you can see on this guy here, he wasn't being played in this game, but this is my opponent's Incarn conversion, which is just this big swirly orc boy with a big axe, which I thought was pretty fun. So that was pretty cool. I like to see, creative conversions, and there was a painting prize, which my opponent was definitely angling for at the event. But it was a Craft Worlds plus Harlequins. It was kind of the standard Craft Worlds Masterful Shots Expert Crafters, alongside, so to ignore cover and then get the one reroll hit and wound every time they shoot, alongside a Soaring Spite Harlequin detachment with, I think, 4 Star Weavers with all of their fusion pistols. So is it pretty, a pretty standard Mixed Eldari list, I think I would say, on the whole. Oh, why can't I navigate? There we go. And my opponent ended up getting first turn. He also had he had a 1 Skyweaver brick, and he had a couple Hornets as well, which I think were hiding in this photo. This is right at the start of the game. So I anchored on one side of the table. I put my Venom Throps and my Hive Guard in there. I used the 5-man brick of warriors to body block in basically anywhere my opponent could reasonably get into the Hive Guard. So we were just filling all that space with models so that the Sky Strider Troopmaster didn't get in and kill them immediately. My opponent, very intelligently, I think, elected to deploy basically everything castled on the opposite end of the table because he at the very least, because the Dimachaerons are unobscurable, he can interact with me to some extent. And there's nothing really I can do about it. The Hive Guard only shoot 36, so they really only shot until, like, basically here. So my opponent basically had nothing that they could attack into, and my opponent could just drop his Hornet shots, the Pulse Lasers, and the Dark Reaper guns into the Dimachaerons for as long as he wanted to, until I came in and rooted him out of his half of the table. So a little bit of a refused flank for my opponent. He did have 1 Skyweaver and I think 1 Player Troop, and the or 1 Star Weaver, excuse me, and then the Skyweaver unit were hiding up in there. But that was about all my opponent put across from me. Yeah, and 1 Hornet as well was over there. So he ended up taking the first turn and sinking everything into the Dimachaerons. Fortunately, he had the Dark Reapers, which aren't affected by the Venom Thrope aura, but the rest of the shooting was pretty hampered by the Venom Thrope aura. And I believe that I had transhumaned the one that he was trying to dig into and kill, and he only ended up hitting it for 13, I think. So he dropped it to 5, which, to be fair, because he deployed so aggressively, and he actually ended up moving back, or using a Fire and Fade on his Skyweavers to move them even farther, so that they were going to be pretty far out of charge range, meant that one Dimacharon was essentially going to be useless for the game, because it couldn't close, with the movement reduction after being bracketed, it couldn't really close the distance to get to grips with his army. So that wasn't that wasn't super great. He did have he had a Hornet that was hiding over here, and he put a player troop in front of it to hold on to this objective. So I did have something to do. The Wounded Dimacharon is this one right here. He just sat on the middle objective alongside the Hive Tyrant with Biomorphic Carapace. These big things in the middle I will mention are obscuring. So the Hive Tyrants and stuff could hide behind them, but the Dimacherons obviously could not. I ended up killing the player troop with like smites and shooting and stuff like that. And I think I just fired the Hive Guard at them to wipe them out. I got a kind of a gambly double move on the full health Dimacharon. Unfortunately, I whiffed all of my defensive psychic powers, even with a CP reroll. I missed my Synaptic Barrier, and I missed my Catalyst on that guy. I was expecting all of the shooting to go into him, and he just had no defenses up whatsoever. So he was just out in the wind. But he did get double moved. I think I had to CP reroll an advance roll in there somewhere. I got the onslaught off so he could advance and charge. And then I needed, even at the end, after all that, he needed like a 6-inch charge to get a Hornet that was like chilling right in the back of my opponent's deployment zone. Right on the table edge. But he barely got there. He ripped that thing into a billion tiny pieces. And that was my exciting turn one. I guess I should mention secondaries and stuff like that. I believe my opponent and I both took Retrieve Bacteria's data and engaged in all fronts. I took Grind Them Down, and my opponent took... I don't remember what... Oh, Bring It Down. He took Bring It Down. Which makes sense, because I have a lot of monsters. Fortunately, because this is pre-Warstone Knockboons, the Dimacherons also only give up 2 victory points rather than 3 on Bring It Down. So this list in its entirety actually only gives up 12 points on Bring It Down, which feels a little low. The 18 Wounders giving up 3 in the new book, I think, is going to make a lot more sense. That's another little... it's a tiny bit of a nerf for the Dimacherons, but I don't think it's as big of a one as the points cost reduction that we see. Or the points cost increase, I should say. It's certainly not a reduction. Definitely an increase. I did have, it's important to note, I did have a unit of warriors that are a little bit off screen here. There's another ruin basically right over here. Oh, you can't really see it on the stream. But right off of the, outside of the camera. And... yeah, it's this ruin right here. And I had a unit of warriors hiding behind there that were just peeked at by, I think, a couple of the Dark Reapers and the Shuriken catapults, or the Shuriken cannons, excuse me, on some of the Star Weavers. So I ended up losing 2 of them, but I think I -1 damaged the Dark Reapers, so they didn't kill me too hard, and I ended up surviving with 1, which is good because it made my engaging all fronts a lot easier, and I was able to retrieve Bacteria's data, that table quarter, with that 1 remaining guy, which was pretty handy. So back to my opponent's turn. Here's my little castle, my bunker. You can see the objective marker over in the corner here that this Dimacharon and the Hive Tyrant are sitting on. The Dimacharon just barely inside the Venom Thrope Aura to keep everybody safe. Back to my opponent's turn. He fired everything into the 2 Dimacherons and ended up barely not killing them, which was shocking. So the one that had moved up in the middle, who was out of range of the Venom Thrope auras, ended up taking 17 damage through his transhuman. So he was on 1. We had a very exciting invulnerable. It came down to the last invulnerable save, I think, on one of the Tempest launchers on one of the Dark Reaper Exarchs, which brought him down to when he was on a single wound, and he had to make a single exciting 5-up, and he made it, which was super good. The other one ended up taking a couple damage just from some pop shots that went into him. But that was about all that my opponent was able to do. He did clear out the last warrior that was in the back over here. Stop that guy from doing anything silly. And that was mostly my opponent's turn. He did get his Death Jester was in this Skyweaver right here, and he had the 3 damage relic Shuriken cannon. So he was able to go in, and he actually killed a Hive Guard with that gun. But just 1, which was just fine. And the Hive Guard weren't really doing anything in the game anyway. But I was sort of hoping I would pick that thing up the next turn, but my opponent was very intelligent with it in my turn. So when it came back to my turn, I sent the Dimacherons in to kill the Star Weaver that was over there. I actually double moved the Smashy Tyrant, so he was in the back here, and he double moved into the middle. Obviously, Swarmlord got in here to give him a get him within the 6-inch aura, and then he moved in to attack the Star Weaver, or the Sky Weavers, excuse me. I was a little bit low on CP there, and to make sure I killed them, I ended up breaking through, which killed 2 of them. And I fought first there, and this was a bit of a misplay on my part. I fought first with the Hive Tyrant who was fighting them on the objective, and that was to allow me to pile in to touch my opponent's objective, because all of his troops on this side of the table were in transports. So the Hive Tyrant counting as 12 models for controlling objectives meant that I would take his objective away. In hindsight, I had Catalyst on that guy, and I was sort of assuming that he would just like eat all the damage for a turn, and that would just be that. He would be the guy that took the fall for all the other guys. And then I would drop my opponent down to just a 5-point primary, because his only other objective he was holding was here. He had some Shining Spears that had moved up over here, but they got killed by the Hive Guard. I realized after the fact that I hadn't been able to move my Trigon Prime quite far enough over to get engaged on all fronts in this table quarter down here. So, and I wasn't sure if I really wanted to lose the Smashy Tyrant this early in the game. So I ended up, once he killed the Skyweavers, I ended up just overrunning him back to hide behind this. I think I needed a 2 or a 3 to get him far enough to actually hide behind the Obscuring and not be shot by everything, and he rolled a 1. So he got stuck in just a little bit of his base. So he was visible, but which is obviously, that's information I didn't know. And if I'd known that he wasn't going to be on the objective and wasn't going to be behind the terrain, I probably wouldn't have spent the CP to overrun. But I did get the point for engaged on fronts, which did feel good. But what that did mean is that my opponent did get his 10 points on primary that turn. The other thing that it meant is that because I fought first with the Hive Tyrant so that it wouldn't get based by a potential interrupt, or have the Skyweavers run away from an interrupt, it did mean that the Star Weaver over here interrupted fighting at the 1-wound Dimacharon that was up here, and ended up just curtain falling directly out of melee, which meant that he could come over and start mucking with my backline, which after the fact, it was like, of course, that's what Harlequins do. I don't know why I wasn't playing around that. Definitely should have just eaten the potential escape from the Skyweavers, made my opponent shoot the super duper tanky Hive Tyrant, and just called it a day and lost my point on engage. But at least I would have gotten rid of this annoying Starweaver, but I didn't do that. So, it is what it is. So my opponent got his 10 on primary. I got my 3 on engage. The Starweaver survived, and we called it a turn. Here's a better picture of my my opponent's Venom and/or Starweavers. Again, we got these little goblins piloting them. Super silly. But what my opponent ended up doing is, in his turn, sort of moving very aggressively to try to get rid of the monsters that were kind of threatening his half of the table. So he dived in with the fusion. The awkward part is that because the Trigon Prime is a character, which kept coming up over the course of the event, he can heroically intervene, which is pretty good. So it meant that my opponent had a very tough time positioning his Starweavers in a way that they could be where they wanted to be and not be heroically intervened by either of the monsters here, the Hive Tyrant or the Trigon Prime. And that was especially compounded by the fact that this one had the Skyweaver Troopmaster in it. So what my opponent ended up doing is moving aggressively with the Sky. There's the Orc Karn, I guess, the Incork, his Orc Incarn. I think is pretty cool. So what my opponent ended up doing is, moving up with both of his Star Weavers here to pile out his Troopmaster, who you can't really see. Let's move my shot a little bit here. Oop, that's not what I wanted to do. There he is. There's a Troopmaster back here. Look at that guy. So he jumped out into the ruin over here and made an advance, but because he needed to get as much distance as possible, he was opening himself up to a potential heroic intervention from the Trigon Prime, which wasn't great for him. I did have Synaptic Barrier on the Trigon Prime as well, because I knew he might have gotten fusioned a little bit, so that would have been pretty awkward. So my opponent moved up. He did kill both of them at the Dimachaerons finally this turn. finally got rid of both those guys. But that took a lot of his shooting. The fusions went into all of the 4+ invulnerable saves and actually ended up biffing a little bit. The Trigon took a bunch of damage, but the Hive Tyrant survived. I think a couple shots went into Swarmlord, and he maybe took 1 or 2. That was about it. But it ended up not being a particularly powerful turn for my opponent. The Troopmaster did, however, get into the Hive Guard. He's hiding in the back here. He got into the Hive Guard and ended up killing, I think, 3 of them. So they're with the +1 damage stratagem, +1 damage against infantry. And I had some invulnerable saves. He had some not super great wound rolls. And the Hive Guard just barely survived, but he did get rid of most of them. But that left the Troopmaster kind of out in the open. And that let me get up in and start mincing down some elf boys. So the Trigon used the heroic intervention to get in, blow up one of the Starweavers. This is my next turn. So we moved the Hive Tyrant back to deal with the Troopmaster back there. He ended up just shooting him to death with the Devourers. And we did a bit of a cool thing. I was hoping that the Hive Tyrant could get in on the Skyweaver over here that the Deathchester had been in, and breaking through on it to let Swarmlord charge the guys inside. Unfortunately, he failed his charge, so Swarmlord had to do it. So Swarmlord charged the Skyweaver, broke through, piled out all the dudes inside, and then the Warriors charged them. That's because breaking through happens when you complete your charge. It's not at the end of your charge phase. So you can use it to sort of sequence transport activations, which is kind of cool. Tyranids have traditionally had some trouble dealing with transports. They've had good tools to be able to kill them, but sometimes it has been a little tough. So you have to like kill them in the psychic phase and then shoot them, or double tap to kill the stuff inside if you're killing them in the shooting phase. But in the fight phase, they've had basically no counterplay against transports. This would have been good technology back when raiders were like taken all the time, but you know, it is what it is. I'll take what I can get. So that ended up clearing everybody but the Deathchester that was in that transport. The Trigon was able to blow up one of the Skyweavers, and the Hive Tyrant ended up actually just jumping back over to my opponent's objective to contest that objective and kill the Hornet that was hiding over here as well. So we got in all the Hornets, we got in most of the Starweavers, excuse me, and that was mostly the back-breaking turn for my opponent. He had to come in at one point with the fusion pistols. Unfortunately, he came in on a turn where my synaptic barriers were up, and it ended up bouncing on the fusion pistol attacks and not quite doing enough damage. I think he did end up, if I could get to my next photo here. He did end up killing the Swarmlord. So these are his remaining troops popped out, and the Swarmlord went in to try to go kill them to score, to get additional points on my last grind them down. And on my opponent's final turn, he ended up killing the Swarmlord just barely. But I was still able to score pretty highly. That was just to get him some bring it down points. Here's some gorgeous armies that were also at the event. And that ended up with, I can just check my score right here. I think it was a relatively competitive score. It was 95 to me. I dropped a couple points on engaged on fronts, and obviously I took Retriever Victoria's data, which I was able to score out fully with the Warriors and the Lictor. My opponent scoring 73. So overall pretty good, and I think that's, just indicative of how powerful Harlequins are, just in general at playing the primary objective, but the Crusher Stampede got there. It was a lot of my opponent, he had good weapons to shoot at the Dimachaerons, but there weren't a ton of them. It was mostly just he had a lot of strength 4 shooting, which is obviously better against the toughness 7 on the Dimachaerons than it would be the toughness 8 on somebody else. But the strength 8 missile launchers were very good, but unfortunately he only had 6 of those. So he was a little low volume. I think if he had basically any other long-range shooting whatsoever, D cannons or anything, certainly would have helped knock those Dimachaerons out a little bit earlier. But going second, I was a little bit worried about going second against Harlequins, and he played very cagey on the first turn, which I think was probably the right call. But maybe he could have maybe just dived one fusion boat into me and tried to keep me in my deployment zone in order to finish off the first Dimachaeron, so he didn't have to deal with it later. I think that might have been better. But that put me at 1-0 going into the next round. So let's talk about that one. So this is by the way, this is absolutely, I think this, army did win Best Painted at the event. This is a World Eater's army, and it is frickin' gorgeous. He has a Chaos Knight. Can we see the Chaos Knight? Yeah. All converted up in the back. Some War Dogs. A bunch of infantry. Just gorgeous. There were some really nice armies there, and I think I took some other pictures of them. This is a very cool... I think this is supposed to be an Onager Doomcrawler. It might also be a War Dog. I'm not sure. It was a fully Adeptus Mechanicus army, so I was pretty sure that it was an Onager. I don't know if you would take a super heavy auxiliary to take a single War Dog, but who knows. And this is where we're on to round 2. So I did get Grey Knights round 2, which was a matchup I was a little bit worried about. But it was a kind of a non-standard version of Grey Knights. There was a Paladin Bomb in it. Not a unit that you see very often, mostly because they're slow and it takes a billion CP to keep those guys alive. Yeah, the 10 Paladins in one list, pretty cool. Supported by the Apothecary alongside Kaldor Drago to give them all the buffs. He had the one souped up Grandmaster Nemesis Dread Knight, so with the Servant of the Throne plus the Sigil of Exigence. So if I shoot at him, he can redeploy, and then if he can also pop 3+ invulnerable save for the entire turn. So he can potentially, if I shoot him, drop in front of me, and then 3+ invuln save. I probably don't kill him, and he just goes ham on my army, which is pretty scary. But I think he's mostly there to pull focus from the huge Paladin unit. I ended up... We're on battle lines, obviously, so we have the 4 objectives back here, and then one in the back over there. Now, a problem... One of the strengths of Grey Knights, and a problem in the Grey Knights matchup that certainly doesn't help Tyranids at all, is that the secondary objective picks for Tyranids are not very good against Grey Knights. And especially, I mean, kind of sleeper pick here, the Paladin Bomb, makes that even a little bit tougher because there's not really any secondaries that work well against it. Not even no prisoners, because the rest of the list is so light on infantry. There were only, I think there were 2 interceptor squads and like 2 strike squads. So it was like you could get maybe 7 on no prisoners, which, to be fair, against Grey Knights isn't the worst deal. But that's certainly not what you're looking for if you're looking for good secondaries. And especially because Grey Knights have Purifying Ritual in their side, they have a very consistent secondary that they can fall back on, which means that Grey Knights are almost always going to be ahead of you on the secondary objective scoring. So I ended up taking Grind Them Down, which I think is kind of an indefensible pick. But the rationale was that I could take, I could take no prisoners or something and probably be guaranteed maybe 7 points if I kill a lot of my opponent's infantry. The flip side is that if we play a very cagey game, my opponent does the correct thing. He scores out his secondaries passively. He gets his psychic rituals going and just chills and casts some psychic powers and says go every turn. Then I will be unspeakably far behind on my secondary objective score. So I need a secondary objective that I'm actually capable of maxing, and I have to go as hard as I can to try to max that secondary objective, which ended up working out, but things are a little bit dicier than I would certainly hope for them to be. So I ended up going first this game. My other secondaries were, again, Retrieve Octarius Zeta, and again, Engage in all fronts. That Lictor in there, he was doing the Lord's work, scoring me out my Octarius Zeta. It's going to be a lot tougher in Warzone Knockmoons once I don't have that guy, especially in the Grey Knights matchup, because I think a lot of times you can try to play out for mental interrogation, but Grey Knights are so good at denying psychic powers. I don't think that that's a very good plan. So I think the Grey Knights matchup becomes much more difficult in Warzone Knockmoons. Although, to be fair, their list sucks much worse now, so that's good. My opponent's list actually wouldn't have changed very much if we were using the new rules, because he only had a single detachment out of Prescient Brethren. So he had the ability to regen CP and got the reroll 1 Zora, or reroll 1 stratagem for any of his units that he wanted, which is pretty good. It's very good on the Dread Knights. But like I said, I ended up going first. We moved very aggressively with one of the Dimachaerons. I ended up deploying the bunker, as it were, back here behind the one sort of effective piece of obscuring terrain that was in my deployment zone. Like I said before, terrain was a little bit light. These were obscuring ostensibly, but the way they're oriented doesn't really do much when you consider it. Like, especially an irregular circular piece of terrain leaves like these huge lines of sight open through most of the table. So my opponent had like, and my opponent being Grey Knights obviously had basically every avenue that he could to jump into to shoot into there. So hiding in the back here wasn't gonna help very much. So we could basically only hide behind this thing, maybe this a little bit, which is why there's a warrior unit back there. So we deployed the bunker behind this piece of terrain. Both of the Dimachaerons were sort of in the middle, inside the Venom Therapora, in case I got shot by Dread Knights. And this was the dense cover back here, so the rest of the flyers were sort of hiding in there, so we could get -1 to hit on almost the entire army. I double moved the Dimacharon with onslaughts into my opponent's Nemesis Grandmaster was here. You can see their hands in the way a little bit, but the Dimacharon's right next to them, fighting them. And I figured that if I dumped a boatload of CP on the Nemesis Grandmaster and I just killed him with the Dimacharon, that would be probably a fine trade, because I still have all of the reactive abilities that Crusher Stampede has normally. So I can fight on death, I can explode on death, I can do a bunch of mortal wounds back to my opponent. So if I just dive a Dimacharon into his army, and if I get rid of that Grandmaster Nemesis Dread Knight, I'm going to feel much better about my chances, because I no longer have to worry about this thing that can react to being shot at. My opponent had an Interceptor squad hiding in the building here, but I knew I needed to try to get an additional kill, because I figured we would trade here with the Dimacharon charge. So I needed one more kill to try to grind them down, because I didn't think my opponent could reliably get anything else on this turn anyway. So I fired all of the Hive Guard into the Interceptor squad. I flurried, Relentless Flurried. I bioweapon bonds them. I was very excited. And then I rolled just abysmal wound rolls. And I killed 2, and then double shot and killed 2 more. And the last guy survived and put up a big old silver armored middle finger at the rest of my army. As I just stared at him forlornly. I did go up with the Hive Tyrant over here and tried to cast some psychic powers onto the Grandmaster. It's a little tough to get mortal wounds onto him, because obviously he's got Aegis and he's got the +1 to deny, so it is tough. But any mortal wounds you can get through make the kill a lot better. Now I did make a little bit of a misplay. I was very excited to be fighting with the Dimacharon, and I didn't end up +1 damaging the Dimacharon, but I did a Voracious Appetite and banked a bunch of CP for a fight twice if I needed it. But I didn't end up breaking through, and I think it was kind of in my head when I formulated the plan, but I just didn't do it when I went to the charge phase, and then we just went right to fight, so I just totally missed it. And the Dimacharon punched him real good. He had aggressive surge on him, so he was swinging, I think, 8 attacks plus the tail, and only got 1 through on the first swing versus the 3+ invulnerable save, which didn't feel great. My opponent swung back with the Grandmaster, did a bit of damage. I had Catalyst and Synaptic Barrier on the Dimacharon, so he was a little bit tough to take down on the swing back, so I didn't take too much damage. I spent the double fight, and I got 1 more hit through, and left him on, I think, just 2 wounds. So if I had broken through, I would have just killed him, and that would have felt pretty good. But I didn't, so he survived, which I was very sad about. The other thing that did was it gave my opponent a charge target with the Paladin squad to get them into the center objective, which I wasn't super happy about. If I did end up killing that guy, I could reposition back 3 inches like this, and then so he wasn't within 3 inches of the Paladins, and then overrun back behind the terrain over here, which would have made that charge with the Paladins much more difficult because they're so slow. Didn't end up happening, though. Dimacharon we just bounced off each other, basically, with the Dimacharon fight. The Paladins, on my opponent's turn, I was projecting forward my denies and the Shadow and the Warp, as well as the 4+ deny from High Fleet Leviathan. So I had some psychic defense to protect the Dimacharon from the swing back. He took a couple of wounds in the psychic phase from smites and stuff, but fortunately the Catalyst prevented a lot of that. And I was saving, he ended up Empiric Lodestoning the Dimacharon for +1 damage for Psi and Nemesis weapons, which I let go through. In hindsight, it hadn't clocked with me that it affected also the Nemesis weapons. So I was expecting expecting him to Lodestone with the Grandmaster, then Gate of Infinity the Grandmaster out of melee to open me up to shooting, and then have all 3 Dread Knights shoot me with the +1 damage on the Psi Cannons. Would have been a lot of at least a lot of 2 damage attacks going through, and then follow that up with the Paladin squad attacking. So I figured that I would block the gate, and that would block a lot of the damage. I probably should have tried to deny the lodestone, but he got it off on a big number, so I didn't feel like denying it with the standard die from the Hive Tyrant, and I didn't 4+ deny it. I saved the 4+ for the gate. My opponent ended up, of course, failing the Gate of Infinity, so I ended up, I think, not even using my deny that turn. But my opponent did get, let's see where my next photo is. Oh, man, I missed a lot of photos in this game, apparently. I'm sorry, chat. My opponent did get the last interceptors over here. I think there were actually 2 left in this unit to jump up onto that objective and Purifying Ritual it. He, I think, also had another interceptor squad jump onto this objective to Purifying Ritual. And so he got his big Purifying Ritual turn and then elected to be pretty aggressive with the remainder of his infantry. He charged into the Dimacharon over here, basically because he couldn't control the objective because I counted his 18 models. He essentially just wanted to get some extra damage on the Dimacharon, and I think they ended up they hit me for 4 or 5, which is not the end of, it's not too bad, but it's not the end of the world, obviously. And I'm pretty happy to kill that interceptor squad, especially because it kills it on my opponent's turn, which means it counts as the same battle round for grind them down. So if my opponent did end up killing any of the guys in the front here, I still would have scored grind them down. He put a bunch of damage into the Dimacharon, and with shooting and stuff from the Nemesis Grandmaster that was stuck in melee. And he also got a bunch of damage onto the Hive Tyrant here with Biomorphic Carapace with a Cybolt ammunition from the Paladin squad. He did a little bit more damage than I was expecting to take, so I was a little bit worried about that Hive Tyrant sitting there. I believe he also got a charge with the Interceptor squad into that Hive Tyrant as well, and left it on a single wound. Which is very lucky. The Hive Tyrant, because he was degraded so hard, he didn't end up killing the Interceptor squad back. I think he killed 4 out of the 5 instead of wiping the unit, which ended up working out for me because I was able to pick that guy up next turn with in order to get grind them down for the second turn. The Paladins charged into the Dimacharon. We rolled a million saves, and I actually rolled terribly on my invulnerable saves. I think he put 10 wounds through onto the Dimacharon, and I made 3 invulnerable saves out of the 10, so 7 went through. And then I made an unreasonable number of 5+ damage ignores from Catalyst, and the Dimacharon survived, I believe, also on 1 wound, which was pretty silly. The Dimacharon then got to fight next and kill the Nemesis Grandmaster, which I was so excited about. That guy was dead for real, and that ended up actually scoring me my grind them down because I killed the Grandmaster, I killed a couple of the Interceptors, and I didn't actually lose any of the monsters. The monsters survived on 1 wound apiece, so we were hanging on by a thread there. Thank you, monsters. That did allow me in the subsequent turn to get my Dimacharon through and charge a Dread Knight that had moved up on this objective to Purifying Ritual it. So he ended up blowing that Dread Knight up, got all the buffs, got his Synaptic Barrier, he got his Aggressive Surge, and he actually ended up getting his Thorax Spine Mine to a unit of Servitors that were also holding his objective. There, you can see them in the corner. And he ate them, which gave him his Catalyst save for the rest of the game, which is super handy because he was way out of range to get spells cast on him at all. I also, in the upper corner, here he is. Look at this little guy. I had a Lictor over here, sponsored by Dunkin' Donuts, drop into the corner here. My opponent dropped a Strike Squad to shoot at him and actually didn't kill the Lictor. My opponent then had to decide whether or not he was going to try to reorient that Strike Squad to actually fight for the objectives or kill 1 Lictor, and he decided it wasn't worth his time. So the Lictor ended up surviving and scoring me engaged on all fronts for a couple more turns. So the tail of my models surviving on a single wound are pretty... It continues. It's pretty good. I was very excited about that. Yeah, we can see the Paladins end up moving through here. The Dimacharon survived the Paladin charge, got to swing back into the Nemesis Dread Knight. It stuck around in combat for a turn. I ended up keeping the Hive Tyrant. This is after my turn 2. I ended up keeping the Hive Tyrant in melee to try to paroxysm the Paladin squad so that I would fight first with the Dimacharon and then potentially fight on death once they killed me to try to remove as many Paladins as possible. Failed all of my psychic powers over there, unfortunately. I also didn't get a chance to... I tried to smite the 1 Interceptor that was in there. I tried super hard, and unfortunately, he just tanked it all, and I didn't get any damage through, which is very sad. But I was looking pretty good at this stage because I did have the Dimacharon over here fighting for the or taking control of the objective over here because he counted as a billion wounds and my opponent's objective secured was elsewhere. Although the Paladin squad was definitely getting pretty deep into the heart of my my army. I did throw the 5-man Tyranid warrior squad up here, sacrificed them to the Paladins, and just ran them in the way so that they couldn't get too far. My opponent, yeah, there they are. Sorry, guys. You'll be fine. What's the worst that could possibly happen? My opponent ended up going in and clearing those guys out. This is the strike squad that failed to kill the Lictor and felt very bad about it. They ended up moving over here to take objective 3 back. He had another strike squad drop in the bottom here in the ruins to purify that objective and hold it down, and they ended up getting murdered by Swarmlord. So we were the game sort of was at the stage, at least with this Dimacharon, we were controlling, well, at least these 2 objectives pretty solidly. This one was probably very quickly going to be taken by the Paladins because the Apothecary in my opponent's army, who was regenerating a Paladin every turn, by spending a CP, had the objective secured aura. So as soon as they got to that objective, they could take it away from me, since I had very little obsec left in that corner besides these little warriors who would die immediately as soon as they went to the objective. What did end up happening is that my opponent, in my fight phase, killed the Dimacharon. I wasn't able to get Paroxysm off. It fight on death, killed, I think, 3 Paladins. And I felt pretty good about that. The next turn, they, I think, got off their Sanctuary, but they didn't get off Armored Resilience to give them a 1+ armor save, and that meant that the Hive Guard actually shot in and killed 2, which is pretty good. I then charged in the Trigon. We got to see if the Trigon was ready to get some work done. He was very excited, but my opponent boss's Sanctuary save, I think I only killed 1 or 2. But that still left only, I believe, 3 Paladins remaining after the dust had cleared there. So my opponent was very, very quickly running out of models. Yeah, and we can see as things sort of wrapped up here, the strike squad moved in to try to get rid of this Dimacharon. The other Dread Knight had charged it, left it on just a couple of wounds, yeah, bracketed it, but the Catalyst was, or the 5+ damage ignore from eating the Servitor squad had was really saving me at that point. So, and I ended up tanking the Dread Knight and killing it in response, which was pretty sweet. The Paladins ended up getting in, and they killed the Trigon with the help of Drago. The Apothecary wasn't quite able to get there, so they weren't objective secured, and I just threw the Venom Thropes in the way to keep them off for a turn, and just kept shooting at them, plinking with smites and shooting from the Hive Tyrant that was up at the top of the building, and then just kept shooting them with the Hive Guard. So they probably would have eventually died, but they would have chewed through a lot more of my army had the game continued. But I think we ended up talking it out at this point. We're basically at a stage where the Dimacharon and the Swarmlord were going to go in and kill these guys. The shooting was going to kill the Paladins, and I would basically have control of these 3 objectives pretty easily. So I was going to get a bunch of points. And I ended up, I think, here's my score sheet there. I ended up almost maxing that one out. Yeah, I lost 1 on engage on the first turn. I lost 1 turn of grind, which, to be fair, was a little lucky. That was sort of why we took grind, because I didn't have good secondaries against Grey Knights, but I certainly don't think I get 12 on grind every time. I was expecting a 9er, but getting 12 was pretty good, and that put me right at the top of the standings going into the final round, which was pretty good. I was feeling pretty good about myself and my silly 3 Dimachaerons or 2 Dimachaerons and 1 Trigon Prime. It was a lot of ovular bases that I hadn't really played before. So let's talk about the final game. So this is actually the tournament organizer has this table of terrain, which is let's see, here it is. Yeah, look at this. It's his personal table, and it's all the GW terrain kits, and it looks absolutely gorgeous. So I want to throw a shout out there. This terrain looks great, and I was very happy to play on it in the finals. There were 2 undefeated tables at this point, so there's always going to be only a single undefeated player, and then the first versus second would get decided by battle points, or by victory points, I should say. And I was pretty high on victory points because I had 2 pretty big wins, and my opponent had actually played another Tyranid player, or not my opponent, the other player who would end up going undefeated at the end of the event, who was playing Adeptus Mechanicus, who we just barely dodged, and we dodged them because they hit another Tyranid player the last turn. And while the Tyranid player didn't win, he was able to play a super cagey game and actually make it a really low-scoring game, which meant that I didn't have to play against Adeptus Mechanicus. So Tyranid solidarity. Thank you to the other Tyranid player at the event for letting me dodge. There were definitely 12 Irish Strider Ballestarii on that list, and I would have immediately been vaporized. So we got there. We dodged them. Anyway, let's talk about this last game. I was playing, it was on the Scouring, which is a mission that for some reason I always get paired up against Death Guard against Death Guard in. And that's happened again somehow. And in the past, it's felt really bad because Death Guard are probably the best army at the game at fighting over the Scouring. Maybe like Adeptus Custodes now, but I don't know. Death Guard are great at it. That was in the pre-Crusher Stampede days, though, so I felt like I had a pretty good opportunity to fight through the Death Guard menace. And this is a very classic kind of OG Death Guard list. It had 2 Plagueburst Crawlers, it had Mortarion, it had 2 actual units of Blightlord Terminators, which had a Tallyman to give them the full combo, the +1 to hit, exploding 6s, an Arch Contaminator on Mortarion, so he could run up and then give them the Plague Weapon Bolters, and they could explode 6s the Plague Weapon Bolters and reroll their wounds and all that stuff, and it was going to be cool. As well as a couple bricks of, he had the Lord of the Contagion, the Foul Blight Spawn, all the normal characters, and a couple bricks of Poxwalkers as well. Now, I was a little bit worried, because obviously the Plagueburst Crawlers are pretty scary. They don't really have the volume, I don't think, to kill the Dimachaerons immediately, but they do threaten the Hive Guard pretty significantly. Fortunately, the Venom Thropes help a lot, because they can give the Hive Guard -1 to be hit, and that is not something that Plagueburst Crawlers really want to be seeing, because they only hit on 3, they don't really have any rerolls, they're just hoping for good rolls. So, I set up pretty defensively. The terrain in the back here actually, in some of the tables had been a forest, but in this one wasn't. So this was actually not dense cover on this particular table. So it wasn't really giving anybody any benefit. It was basically just there. I think it provided light cover, which didn't make a huge difference. The buildings were also kind of big, so the obscuring was a little bit tough. So I basically huddled as much as I could behind the center building here to try to get those Hive Guard as far forward as possible, and then, they have the Dimachaerons just kind of hanging out. This poor Trigon was here too. It's like, I couldn't really obscure him, so I'm like, all right, buddy, you're just in the -1 to be hit aura from the Venom Thropes. I hope you don't die. Good luck! But I ended up winning the roll to go first in this game also, which is always a big deal against Death Guard, because not only do you get the first opportunity to move up the table against the Plagueburst Crawler, so you can get your defensive technology active, but you also can move up to try to get good denies on Mortarion's Miasma Pestilence. So if he tries to Miasma, you can try to 4+ it or just regular deny it and get him inside a Shadow in the Warp aura so that his Miasma has a tough time going off. And that's what ended up happening. So I ended up, let's see where I took photos here. Yeah, here we go. This is the end of my turn 1. I moved up very aggressively because it is the Scouring. So I put my 5-man of Tyranid Warriors in the middle. My opponent, fortunately, the one upside of Death Guard is that they are very slow. So it usually takes them 2 turns to get to the middle. It's tough to take the middle back from them once they're there. But as long as you can get there first, it's not the end of the world. You score a couple big turns. I put the Biomorphic Carapace guy back here. I figured if my opponent wanted to drop his Entropy Cannons into that guy, that was fine with me. I got a 4+ invuln, and I'm ready to pass him. I had the other Hive Tyrant, I had the Trigon Prime and unit of Tyranid Warriors on the other objective here, and then the last Bioweapon Bond unit was hiding in the back. You can kind of see them through the window there. Maybe you can't because my face is in the way, but they're hiding behind my face. So going first and Scouring obviously feels pretty good, even if it is against, or especially, I guess, because it's against Death Guard. I did put all of the buffs onto one of the Dimachaerons. I didn't Catalyst it. I actually Catalysted the Hive Guard because I knew that they would be eating the Plagueburst Mortars. But I wanted to just sink this guy in and get rid of that bloat, or the Flesh Mower drone as quickly as I could that was sitting over here, because outside of Mortarion, that's the fastest unit in my opponent's army, and getting rid of the speedy elements in the Death Guard army is generally the best way to be able to control them, especially as playing Tyranids, since you are so fast and they are so slow, that as you can get rid of the stuff that can respond to your speed, then you're off to the races. So I was hoping I could get into a situation where I could get the Dimacharon in and then jump out and either touch this objective to make Mortarions charge really hard, or just get as far away as I could with the Dimacharon. But my opponent was playing Mortarions Anvil. I might double check that. The Plague Company that lets him, and to be fair, my opponent also didn't know the name of his subfaction. The Plague Company that lets him heroically intervene. It is Mortarion's Anvil. I nailed it. I'm so good at this 40k game. So that meant that any of his units could heroically intervene into the Dimacharon, which meant that he had a very good chance of blocking my avenues at which I could overrun, because while I could potentially try to charge within 3 and then use my pile-in to get outside of 3 of his units, for example. But if I did that, he would just intervene and then touch the Dimacharon, and I couldn't pile in, and I wouldn't be able to overrun, so that was sad. In addition, Mortarion had his 9-inch no rerolls aura, this Gloaming Bloat, which is basically looks something like that. And I had to pile in sort of laterally this way towards the Bloat Drone in order to squeak my base outside of it. That meant that I was going to be within range of the Poxwalkers. I elected not to touch them because I knew if I would kill any, they would just respawn and get additional distance off the table, and they would just be using the pile and consolidate moves to move around, which would potentially give my opponent a lot of additional movement. Like they would move 6 inches, and then if I killed any, they would respawn another 2 inches, and then could potentially get even farther. So I elected not to touch them. I think in hindsight, it might have been the right call to engage them and just force them to take the strength check to give myself the 5+ damage ignore just to eat more damage, but it didn't end up mattering, I think, in the end. So I killed the Bloat Drone, called it a turn, felt pretty good about myself. I did jump all of the Hive Guard shooting into Mortarion himself. Generally, you can expect a pretty reasonable amount of damage from Hive Guard just eventually chewing through Mortarion, but every single time they fired at him, they did exactly 2 damage, which was a little bit of an underperformance, especially since he didn't have miasma, he didn't have any of his defensive tech up. I was exploding 6s with Relentless Flurry, and ended up, I actually rolled very well on my hit rolls almost every time I attacked him. I would hit like 14 or 15 times with just exploding 6s a bunch of times, and then I would wound like 3, wounding on 4s, and he would just take one hit would go through and like ping him for a couple. So Mortarion was really good at tanking my shooting at the start of the game. What my opponent ended up doing, and this was basically the swing point of the game, I think, is commit. He said, oh, well, we got to get rid of this Dimacharon. So everything committed in to kill the Dimacharon. And I think this might have just been some unfamiliarity with Crusher Stampede and the game plan in general, because what ended up happening was my opponent went in with the Death Shroud Terminator unit, the Blight Lord Terminator unit, the Lord of Contagion, the Foul Blightspawn, and Mortarion, as well as the Poxwalkers got in as well, just for some extra movement. And they all attacked and they killed him, and he fought on death, punched both the characters once, and then auto-exploded and killed them with the Mortal Wounds. So we killed 2 Terminators out of the Mortal Wounds. The 2 infantry characters pinged Mortarion for another 3. So he was already taken 7 at that point, killed a couple Poxwalkers, and I was basically burnt on CP at that point, but I was feeling pretty good. I thought that was probably an appropriate amount of damage for the sacrifice of that Dimacharon, and felt like I could probably roll the game out from there. This is at the bottom of my turn 2. I basically just ran everybody up into the middle, shot it at a couple of the Poxwalkers that were moving towards the center here, ended up sending the Dimacharon in to kill them, so he was a little bit upset that I committed him to kill like 30 points of Poxwalkers, but you gotta get rid of that OBSEC when you can. The Smashy Hive Tyrant went in with Aggressive Surge alongside his own extra attacks to clear out the Blight Lord Terminators, ended up leaving 1 alive. I considered giving him objective secured to take this objective away, but I ended up not doing it because I figured there was a non-zero chance he just whiffed and got knocked down a couple wounds, and then my opponent would be able to hold the objective. Blightlord Terminators, not that great at fighting into the damage reduction or even into the high toughness, and especially the -1 to wound. They're usually winning on 6s. So I probably shouldn't have been that worried about it, but I ended up not spending, and that, I mean, graciously allowed my opponent to score some primary objective points because he held the 2 objectives over here. But was definitely feeling pretty good. The Plague Burst Crawlers were firing into the Hive Guard and doing a little bit of damage, as well as firing their entropies into the Trigon Prime, which was like slowly eating away at him. On the subsequent turn, my opponent went in with Mortarion. He flew over the building over here and went into the Dimacharon and just cut it right in half. Just super duper turbo killed that guy. Not much I could do about that. I was burnt on TP at that point, so I didn't have any Final Deaths or anything to use. I think he was also Miasma. I couldn't reroll against him. There's really no very little point in attacking Mortarion with Dimacherons. He's very good at tanking them. But that did leave him in a position where I had to deal with him. Now, unfortunately, my opponent was very clever with his positioning of his Terminators. So we have the last Death Shroud Terminator here, bodyguarding Mortarion, not literally, but giving his life to save Mortarion. So I actually wasn't able to get a couple of smites into him. And I did feel like one downside of this list is it is a little smite low because it just has the Hive Tyrants and the Swarmlord. And if the Smashy Hive Tyrant is off doing something, he's smiting into whatever he's fighting. And Swarmlord and the support Hive Tyrant typically have to be casting all their spells every turn to get Catalyst out and to get Onslaught out, and Synaptic Barrier and Aggressive Surge and all that stuff is generally higher upside than Smite. So we actually don't Smite very well, which is unfortunate into Mortarion specifically, because he just sucks to hit with swords. You want to Mortal Wound that guy as much as you can, which ended up being the plan. So we went in, we put all the buffs onto the Trigon Prime, because he has the highest base damage, or theoretically damage attacks. He's got that D6 plus 1, which becomes just this flat D6 against Mortarion, which is what you kind of need. Unfortunately, he's not rerolling his hit rolls, but we did Bioweapon Bond him, so he could hit on 3s, even in through the Miasma. And then Swarmlord went in there as well. And I brought Swarmlord in so that I could Breaking Through on Mortarion to punch him for a couple wounds, and I think that ended up doing 3 or 4. And then both the Trigon Prime got 1 wound through, which did a couple points of damage, and I think left Mortarion on 1 or 2, and then Swarmlord got like 1 hit through and exactly killed him, which was very close. I think he was on 2, and 1 hit got through, so he had to make 1 damage ignore roll. He failed them both. I had an implant attack in the bank if he survived, but we ended up exactly killing Mortarion, and that was most of my opponent's front line ended up getting taken out there. I believe the flying Hive Tyrant over here was a real problem for him. He couldn't really get through the -1 to wound. Swarmlord, I think, did go down to the Terminators. And the Trigon Prime ended up playing a hilarious game of catch with the Plague Burst Crawlers. He got into one of them and blew it up. We actually used his... I think he got engaged by a Terminator, and we actually used his feed to fall back and still operate. Which is the one time in the tournament I actually used his Synaptic Link, which felt pretty good. He went around the corner to try to get the second one, but ended up failing, and I believe my opponent, in order to score the maximum points he could, he had the choice of trying to kill the Trigon, who is relatively heavily wounded at that point, or firing everything into these warriors and try to kill them, and actually exactly killed them, which got him a hold more on the final turn when he scored bottom round 5. But I think a big deal was the... was the first time Dimacharon going in, and my opponent probably overcommitting into him and allowing me the double or the fight on death auto explode, which was going to be so powerful because I did take Assassinate, which I often take in this matchup, which has very rarely actually scored out very well. But because Death Guard tend to take so many characters, and they are frontline characters, that being able to get rid of those guys is important. But oftentimes you get like 3, and then you kind of run out of steam. But being able to fight on death and get 2 of them because they had charged in felt very good. And I think my opponent would have been better off if he had not committed those guys, or maybe kept some of the Terminators back. He didn't need all of the attacks he went in to kill the Dimacharon, especially after Mortarion had his way with it. So I think that was sort of certainly more damage than I probably had any right to expect out of that one Dimacharon, even though he had just sort of sailed directly into my opponent's army and just sat there for a turn. So two games, I guess, in which the Dimacharon's getting killed and fighting on death actually ended up being a super big deal. But again, didn't end up hitting any of the matchups that were very good at killing Dimacherons before they got to melee, which was super lucky for me, to be fair. So that actually was another big win, ended up putting me at the top of the standings for the event. And like I said, the other player who was undefeated was Adeptus Mechanicus player, who ended up just a little bit below me because his round 2 was not super duper high scoring. So we just got there on victory points, but pretty excited about it. I was happy to play my Trigon Prime for the first time in a super long time. And, you know, playing the Dimachaerons, putting the Dimachaerons on the table was pretty fun. I hadn't actually played Dimachaerons in person before. I was just assembling them before the event. But unfortunately now, with another 25-point increase on those guys, it's going to be a tough sell, I think, especially if you're looking at a metagame that typically plays really heavy anti-armor shooting. That stuff is just going to remove Dimachaerons on the top of one very quickly. And they don't really have a recourse. Unlike Harried Ann or something like that, where it can strategic reserve if it goes second, Dimachaerons can't really do that. They are not good strategic reserving. They really need to be able to place on the table and alpha strike their opponent, like we saw in these games. And if they can't do that because they're dead, it's not good. It's not good. So it'll be interesting to see where Dimachaerons end up, but I don't know if they're going to be quite the same power level than they were in the previous version of Crusher Stampede. Anyway, let's talk to chat for a little bit. How's it going, chat? You can't fight on death and then explode because fight on death removes you from the table. Is that the case? Are those not, did I make a mistake there, chat? Uh-oh. Uh-oh, did I out myself as a dirty cheater? So Death Surge is when your model is destroyed. And I imagine that the explosion is also when you're destroyed, right? Yeah, when they're destroyed. So you get to sequence them however you want, right? So I guess in all technicality, the explosion should always trigger first, right? Because you'll sequence the trigger first, you'll deal D3 mortal wounds, and then you'll say, I'll fight on death. So I guess I misspoke in that the explosion goes first and then you fight. So how's it going, chat? Yeah. Explode then fight. Yeah. So I misspoke. Yeah, you should explode first. Which, to be fair, is probably the better sequencing anyway, because you deal the mortal wounds, and then when you fight, you know how much damage you've dealt to everybody, so that you can allocate your attacks. At least in the case of the Death Guard that have a lot of damage ignore, or at least Mortarion, right? Because, you know, if a Mortarion takes 3, like, maybe we fight Mortarion. I don't know. I think the same thing was going to happen regardless of the orientation that went into. Swarmlord, how would I fix the Tyranid Prime? I think I would make the Tyranid Prime better in melee. I think that he's like fine right now just because of his Synaptic Link in the Gene Stealer lists, but he just sucks to take because he doesn't really do anything. So I would give him Like, give him 2 damage on his swords, man. His melee just sucks so hard. It's like very sad. Sam, your opponent could pull themselves from melee, and then you can't fight since you aren't eligible. The stratagem doesn't, the fight on death doesn't require you to be eligible to fight. None of the Tyranid ones do. You just fight. I was just making sure I'm not talking on my butt with that one. Yeah, it just fights. Yeah, it doesn't require them to be eligible. I think the important thing is that it also lets you do that if they've already swung, which I could see that being changed in the future. There is like the achievement unlocked triple fight where you are selected to fight normally, you fight, then at the end of the phase double fight and engage something new, and then they kill you, and then you fight with the Death Surge. That's like the pie in the sky, which I don't think I've ever seen happen, but certainly could potentially happen. Yeah, so Death Surge, I don't know, it's pretty good. But basically, I think they wanted to keep the same or consistent wording between all of the Tyranid multi-fights, which is just you fight again. You don't necessarily have to be in melee or eligible or not have fought, all that stuff. But it does make it probably it's certainly the most broken version of the ability that you can have. What was my placement? I was number 1. Oh, I forgot. They 3D printed a super cool trophy. We got cool trophies as the prizes, and I didn't bring it out, but it's very cool. I'll post a picture on Twitter, I guess, and then you can look. What Tau Sept am I least interested in fighting against? I don't know. I think a lot of them look very good. Borkon is the one everyone's talking about with ignore invuln saves. I also think Tau Sept with the reroll wound is pretty good because you can get basically full rerolls on hammerheads, which is good. So there you go. Am I looking for more Stinky Boy action in 2.5 hours? I absolutely am. Ray's in chat here, going to be on stream, playing in the T5S2 Invitational. He's playing, for all the folks who are Death Guard stans and are sad that I killed Mortarion with the Swarmlord, then you can watch some super cool Terminus S Assault Force on the table, which I'm super excited about. Am I going to play Tau? Maybe. I don't know. I'm going to try Tau, and then I imagine that I'll get super bored, and I will stop playing them. Because there'll be a bunch of guns, and it'll all be about how much guns you can do. I'm just looking back through people's messages. Tyler, how do I like the combat Flyrant? Do I think the Relic Bone Swords are worth it for ignore invuln saves? Honestly, I don't. I think ignoring invuln saves is a powerful ability. It only gets you to AP3 though, so oftentimes you're like ignoring a 5+ invuln save, but then if they're a Terminator, they just get a 5+ invuln save back, or if they're a Power Armor Marine, they just have a 6-up armor save. So I don't love that. It also eats your Biomorphic Carapace slot, and I think Biomorphic Carapace, the more I play with it, like the sillier it is. I think having that Type Tyrant wounded by like literally 3/4 of the game on 6s is a little dumb. Especially because it works in melee. If it was like ranged only, I think it would be like, okay, sure. But the fact that it's in melee, it's like, whoa. So that guy, unless you have, super powerful guns or just an auto wounding ability, that guy is ridiculously hard to kill. And I'm like all in on that dude. So I think I'd prefer Biomorphic Carapace. And in most cases, if I'm not taking the Super Smashy Tyrant, I'm taking Resonance Barb plus the CP regen. And I think you need the CP regen kind of locked in. That one's almost, especially for Crusher Stampede, that one's almost required. What strats do I think NIDs are going to lose when they get their new codex? That's a great question. I think there's some like random ones that are like sort of very relevant that I think go away. Stuff like implant attack is really good, but also like, why does it exist? Why do we have this random stratagem that does mortal wounds to people, which is like often highly relevant? So I imagine that goes away. I have to imagine that metabolic overdrive probably becomes like an auto 6-inch advance or something instead of the double move. And at the very least, it has to stop actions. I think the fact that it allows actions after you double move is certainly an oversight and probably broken. So I think that stuff is probably likely to go. Maybe we see some reworks and stuff like Voracious Appetite, or maybe Voracious Appetite just gets replaced by better melee stats across the board. Is probably what happens. Matthew Heather, heard conflicting reports about not being able to mix different chapters with new chapter approved. You certainly cannot mix different chapters. Yes, that's the new rule in GT 2021 or GT 2022. If you are not playing GT games, feel free to do whatever you want. The list building rules haven't changed. But if you are playing GT games, if you have any of your keywords that are in the little brackets, the little triangles, you can only select one of those to use in your list. So in the past, you could be like, this detachment will be all bracketed White Scars, and this detachment will be all bracketed Ultramarines. No, it's one or the other. If you have a character or a specialist unit that their keyword is not bracketed, so let's say in one detachment you have White Scars and the other one is mixed Astartes, and you have an Ultramarines unit like a Victrix Honor Guard, that's okay. It will still break all of your sub-faction stuff, so it's like, why do it? But you can't take regular Marines out of multiple factions because the chapter is in a bracketed keyword. What do I think about the single sub faction in light of it killing off the 5 and 6 Dread Knight lists? I have really mixed feelings. I think that the reduction in complexity in list building in the game is good. So the fact that you don't have to you no longer have to look at a tabletop and be like, I have to remember which of these units is in which sub-faction. And especially when you look at things like, and to be fair, this has not changed, so don't get me wrong. You look at a Drukhari list, right? That has 3 different patrol detachments, and every patrol detachment has units from the different sub-factions that are mixed together, such that some of them get sub-faction abilities and some of them don't. Instances like that, where you have to remember which ones have which special abilities, is very difficult. Obviously, that's not changing because Drukhari almost entirely didn't change with that update. But situations like that where you have to remember, is this unit of intercessors? Is this the one that advances and charges, or is this the one that gets +1 to wound? I can't remember. Not having to deal with that is going to be pretty good. So I think for that reason, it's not a bad change. What I don't like is that it's not a core rulebook change. So instead of reducing complexity by reducing the number of rules governing list building, they've just added another rule governing list building, which means that as a new player coming into the game, you're reading through 6 different documents to try to figure out how you fricking build your list, which, to be fair, is ridiculously convoluted in 40k. It's insanity. I don't this game wouldn't be playable without Battlescribe. It's too difficult to build lists in 40k, and this is just another additional addendum that gets added on top. And like we just talked about, where sometimes it affects chapter keywords and sometimes it doesn't, because whether or not you are a bracketed keyword matters. It's going to get really stupid. So I think, and I talked about this a little bit in the video where I talked about that the change. I think that the problem is that Games Workshop is rolling back on their philosophy of giving sort of to full freedom for players to build their lists. like in 8th edition and previous, where you could just basically do whatever you wanted. Where, 8th edition was like, I don't know, mostly keep your stuff to detachments if you want to, but you don't have to, because you could take like mixed Astartes detachments, or like weird, mixed sub-faction detachments, or all this weird stuff that would, still be like technically legal, but make things super awkward. But you can just take like 3 detachments out of 3 different factions and everything's fine like that. But now that they're trying to walk that back, and so they're introducing these rules that you then lose if you have that, and then they're introducing these rules like this chapter approved rule, where it disincentivizes that kind of list building. I think that's actually problematic, because they have this entire framework of rules that are designed around allowing players to build whatever army they want, and then they have just started to tack onto that additional rules that then disincentivize exactly what that, what the other rules say. Just make up your frickin' mind, GW. Either let players take whatever they want and just be like, hey, we're playing, I don't know, Eldar versus Imperium, and you can take any units. Just do that. Free things up. Make it nice. Or say you can only take things out of one codex, full stop. And either one of those would make the game less confusing. And they're like half-assed it, and this is classic GW. In order to reduce complexity in the game, they've made the game more complex, which is frustrating. But I think in general it's pretty good. I think it's going to make the game a little bit more competitively viable, which I think is fine. Have I tried the Synaptic High Blades? I have. They were fine. That's what I have to say about that. Are 9th edition Genestealer cults better? They sure are. Yep. They kept a lot of their deployment rules, which I thought they would lose. And they gained a bunch of ways to shoot people with guns that are super good. So I think they're super duper solid. Does my performance with the Dimacharon list improve Dimachaerons in my eyes? No. Not at all. I think I got lucky on my matchups. The one matchup I was worried about, which is Grey Knights, I think I got lucky in that, like, I rolled pretty well that game, right? But also, and I went first. But also it was not, like a meta version of the list. Like the Paladin Bomb is like, that's some good old 2019 technology that we're rolling out there. So, and it is a version of the list that I do think Crusher Stampede is good against, because my opponent puts 500 points in one big unit, and a Dimacharon just comes in and punches half of it to death immediately. So, I think I lucked out. If I'd hit that Adeptus Mechanicus list I talked about, I think we would have seen the actual real weakness of Dimacherons, which is just immediately being vaporized by anybody with a gun. And I played against Harlequins, for God's sakes, and they basically killed a Dimacharon top of one. Harlequins, chat. Harlequins did that. I think side Tyra duels are, besides the ability to jump over buildings, side Tyra duels are better in almost every way. So you should just take those. And now, the silly part, to be honest, like, I think side Tyra duels maybe should have gotten a points increase. I think maybe we see Dimacherons up to like 260, 275 or something like that. And side Tyra duels up to 250 probably would have been not surprising to me. The fact that we got Dimacherons up to 280 and no touches to any of the other Hyrule is just ridiculous. Because I think, outside of maybe one, if you play the correct terrain, like, so it's a metagame thing, I don't think you'll ever see Dimacherons. Everyone's just going to pivot to side Tower duels. They are 50 points less expensive. 45. 45 points less expensive. Does Thick City disappear when Tau hits? Well, maybe it becomes Thin City, right? I don't know. I have to see these new codexes on the table before I make a judgment call on how I feel about them. Martin, is a big block of shooty warriors in Crusher worth it? Honestly, like, it's fine, I think, but I don't love it. There's just, like, Hive Guard are just better at shooting. Unfortunately, it's like the unfortunate truth of the Crusher Stampede. I think it's okay. Like, if you want to play shooty warriors, you're not gonna like hate it. They're fine, and having a Synapse unit that is good at shooting gives you access to that stratagem where if you shoot somebody to death, then you can get a bonus to charge that person, which is cool. That's awesome. That's a sweet combo you can use. But unfortunately, they're super expensive, and their guns are not that good. You get, in the fully kitted out unit, you get the 3 Venom cannons, which fire basically battle cannons, which have been wildly power crept, and especially since damage reduction is going to absolutely pulverize them. And then the other guys have strength 5 AP 1, which isn't too bad, unless your opponent is like a Custodian or a Terminator, in which they are very bad, because it's like a high volume AP 1 shooting, except they only 3 shots a model, so you only get 18 shots out of those guys. So it's like you're paying almost 300 points for that unit, plus a CP to upgrade them, plus maybe a adaptive physiology, and it's just too much investment, in my opinion. With Bioweapon Bond and the +1 ballistic skill upgrade, I think from Crusher Stampede, I think it's a lot more viable than it was normally. And not to mention the fact that you can, they get to 5+ the vulnerable save too, so they don't even necessarily need the adaptive physiology, which is all good things. Don't get me wrong, but I think that the cost of the unit is a little bit exorbitant, to be honest. Scar Craig, what do I think? Do I think GW will change Swarmlord's 3+ in melee to, or what do I think it will change to, if anything? I don't think it will change, to be honest. A lot of the characters that have a 3+ invulnerable save are retaining those, and Swarmlords is situational. So I think like the chances of Swarmlord keeping his invulnerable save is very high. But who knows? I mean, maybe it'll be a different thing. It could be anything. I mean, we've been seeing some wild new mechanics come out of these new codexes, which, to be fair, I do appreciate. The Games Workshop, the design team, is actually willing to adapt to adopt new things, to experiment with their game, which is good. And I'm hoping that that would be good. Thoughts on Flyrant with Quad Devourers and Void Crown to do Psychic secondaries and then pull back with Swarmlord? The Quad Devourers aren't helping you there, but if you are playing Crusher Stampede, I think a Quad Devourer Hive Tyrant is super good. Really, the only reason I'm sticking with Rending Claws right now is because it makes that guy okay at fighting backline stuff, whether it's like little things that get into your backline and he can punch them to death. Like, there's like 5 intercessors over there, he can fight them, whereas the Quad Devourer guy kind of can't. But Crusher Stampede does have a problem with high volume infantry, and that guy will just kill a bunch of people. He'll just kill 10 dudes every turn and say go. So I think the Quad Devourer Hive Tyrant's probably super strong. Keep in mind though that you can't shoot your Devourers and then run away with Swarmlord. If you're casting your powers, you're done after you double move. Shinebird, have a friend who is a TO who said the new roster subfaction does stop soup as well. No? Not cross-faction soup. Only inter-faction soup. It stops multiple sub-factions from one codex, but if you want to play multiple codexes together, that's no problem. What do I think of Zones and Neuros 3+? Yeah, I think that probably goes away. I don't know if it gets replaced by anything. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I don't know. Preston, do you keep painting your Crusher Stampede army? Probably. I think at the end of the day, once the dust settles, I think Crusher Stampede is still gonna be a perfectly viable army. I think the problem is that there are going to be a couple matchups, and to be fair, it is just kind of a skew list, so this is kind of how skew lists work. But there are going to be a couple matchups that you will just lose if you hit them. And one of them being the new Tau Codex, which that's going to suck. So if you play Crusher Stampede and you don't have any Tau players in your metagame, keep on rocking. But if you do, be prepared to try to dodge those people, because that matchup is going to be super duper shitty for a while. I think the points cost change makes Dimachaerons worse. So if you're playing like triple Dimachaeron, maybe don't do that. Maybe switch to Side Tyra duels. You'll save a bunch of points. But if you are... most of your other builds are probably fine, in my opinion. What other faction do I think needs the supplemental support that Tyranids have gotten? I mean, I would say Imperial Guard, but they already got one and it didn't help. So that sucks. I mean, most of the other factions that I would pin, I guess Chaos Demons, right? The factions that are bad. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw like Ynnari become an Army of Renown or something like that, which could be interesting. But I do think Chaos Demons needs something to be played as an actual faction, not just like a weird addendum to Chaos Space Marines. And I think Astra Militarum needs something yesterday. To be perfectly honest. Yeah. Most of the other factions have either gotten good supplement support or are just got a new codex and have been made super strong. So there's that. I can't really pinpoint. Besides demons, there's not really any chaos codexes I would really pick. I think, you know, all of the Xenos factions at this point are pretty good. All the Eldari factions, once Craft Worlds get their new codex, are going to be good. Like Imperial Knights got their Army of Renown, which is really, really supporting them in a big way. So besides the outlier of like Drukhari and Grey Knights being stupid, and to be fair, Grey Knights might just get hit by... Like, the chapter-approved update might have just dumpster Grey Knights in terms of being the very top of the metagame, which they are currently. Besides the outlier of Drukhari, which also, in fairness, has a bunch of really bad matchups and aren't, like, the be-all, end-all, I think the game's, like, in a not terrible place. It's not... The balance isn't great, but, I mean, the plan of just making every faction ridiculously brutally broken and then just hoping it works out has been doing okay. Scarcraig gonna play Crusher Stampede regardless because you can consider using a Carnifex. Yeah, that was a big update. Friend played Sally's in Tau, and Longstraight is his favorite model. Oh no, Scar Craig, your Carnifexes. No, not like this. Just go first, okay? Just go first and double move a big flying Hive Tyrant in the middle of his army and burn 9 CP and blow up a bunch of stuff, and then it's probably an interesting game. I think there's gonna be games against Tau where it isn't a blowout. It's when Tau go first. It's basically like old school Adeptus Mechanicus, where like if you go first, it's an interesting game and we get to play. If they go first, the game's over. You might as well pack up. And I think like big super heavy Crusher Stampede is going to be a lot like that. There are going to be Crusher Stampede builds, I'm sure, that come out of the woodwork that are have less emphasis on the 18 wounders and are more like there's a triple Hive Tyrant list in there somewhere that's just like 2 smashies and a support. And, you know, like triple Hive Tyrant, double Hive Guard or something. And that's probably actually playable into something like Tau. So, I don't know. It's probably fine. But I think Crusher Stampede, as people envision it right now, where it's all the big Forge World stuff, Railgun's gonna kill that shit, so. Woof. Woof. Who does Psychic more good, Thousand Suns or Grey Knights? Thousand Suns. Putting my foot down. They get +1 to cast. +1 to cast better than +1 to deny. You heard it here first. Both Explosion and Fight on Death say remove the model after. Maybe I did miss that. Let me check. No, the explosion does not say remove the model after. Oh, unless the actual explosion does? Yeah, the stratagem doesn't. What does the actual explosion say? Yeah, no, Deathstroke just says roll before removing it from play. It doesn't instruct you to remove it from play afterwards like the Fight on Death does. Yeah. Yeah, so the Fight on Death instructs you to remove it once it's destroyed. The explosion just instructs you to resolve before it's destroyed. So I think the only contention would be that Death Surge just immediately kills the model, whereas Explosion is like it just happens when you die. Yeah, no, I don't think there's a conflict there. Imperial Knights got nerfed. I don't think so. Did they? What happened to Imperial Knights, chat? Oh, just because Tau gonna kill them? Yeah. That's a nerf. That's it. The release of the Tau Codex is a nerf. Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry that GT made that ruling, Landon, but I mean, not all GTs make the correct rulings all the time. So, there it is. Oh, the Megara going up, yeah. That is pretty bad. Only the Lightning Lock Moirax went up, though, right? You can still play the other armigers, and it's fine. And I think a lot of people are playing Warglaives anyway, right? Just to spam. It didn't feel like... The Megara hit is a big deal. But honestly, I don't know. Megaras have felt really pushed, like, in a bad way. Like, I played against a Knight player, or a couple of Knight players over the last couple of events, and I'm so used to, like, a Megara activating and being like, oh my god, I'm going to lose 300 points in the shooting phase. And then it was like, boo, take 4. I'm like, oh, never mind. I've been so used to being shot by Cognis las cannons for the longest time that this thing fires, like, several 3 damage gunshots. I'm like, okay. All right, Megara, you got it, buddy. I mean, the Rad Cleanser is, like, pretty brutal, but otherwise, the lightning cannon on that thing is not what I remember it being at the start of the edition. So, yeah, I don't know. I think Knights are just going to have to probably dig into their, like, weird bag of tricks that are all of the Knight loadouts. Preston, what are the chances the Eldar Codex drops and they're more broken than every other army? According to what everyone on the internet is saying, that is certainly going to be the case, but I'll have to see it. I don't like that they basically they took Miracle Dice and gave it to Eldar, and and it's better than regular Miracle Dice. It feels a little parasitic, but, you know, it is what it is. Anyway, so I do have a tournament this weekend, chat, and I'm not sure what to play. I convinced the tournament organizers to use the updated rules, or I bothered them enough to make a decision that they eventually told me that they were going to use the updated rules, which I'm very excited for, because I'm very excited to play with the updated points costs and stuff like that. I do think that it may mean that I don't play Crusher Stampede, but I'm not 100% sure. The actual selection of models I have for Crusher Stampede isn't great. Which is one of the reasons that I don't play it too often in tournaments right now, or I'm not really planning on playing it too often in tournaments. But also, I don't know if I want to play just like regular Genestealer stuff. I might take a look at playing maybe some barbed Hyrule. I do have barbed Hyrule still new in box. I haven't cracked them open yet. But I could maybe play like double barbed Hyrule. They're so expensive though. You end up cutting a lot of extra points. So I'll have to think about it. Wolf bots are bust. I don't have any Dreadnoughts, chat. I don't have any Dreadnoughts. I would play Dreadnoughts if I had them, chat. Brendolf, if you bring me... Do you still play Volkite Contemptors? Probably not, right? What do you play? And Redemptors went up, right? If you bring me a bunch of Wolf and Dreadnoughts, and... I guess you still play Redemptors, right? They went up 10? It's fine. And a bunch of Redemptors, and maybe just Relic Contemptors that don't have Volkite Culverins. Can we just play quad las cannon Contemptor Dreadnoughts and call it a day? That's probably fine, right? How much are these Relic Exemptor builds? Ah, 190? 215 with the with the Cyclone? Ah, that's so expensive. Fuck. Maybe Plasma. Can we take Plasma Cannons? We could take Plasma Cannons. It's only D3 shots, though. Oh, but they're free. Ooh. Strength 8, yeah. I guess Multi-Melt does, right? It's just Multi-Melt does. Yeah, that's 185? 185 with the Cyclone? And it's four Melt-A-Shots and then 2 missiles? That's fine, right? That's fine. Jonathan, list taking is advantage of the new points drops. Tyrannifex, Haruspex, Exocrine good again. I'm a little... I think the Tyrannifex is interesting, right? So Tyrannifex went down 15. And I think that's... to be fair also, though, chat, I don't own any Tyrannifexes. So I don't know if I'll be playing any Tyrannifexes this weekend. Because they have never been good since the time I've been playing. But they're, what are they, 180 with acid sprays? That's not that bad. $180? Or they're just one, or sorry, not one, yeah, no, not 180. They're 180, what? They're 160? Ah, that's not too bad. Or like 155 with a Flesh Borer Hive? Oh, did they go did they go down 10 or 15? Oh, that they went down 15. Did I read that wrong, chat? I've just looked at a preview. I haven't gone through all of the rules myself, to be perfectly fair. So I'm sort of talking out of off what I've read. What did I read here? Oh yeah, it's down 10. Okay, so 165 with acid. That's still pretty good. That's not a bad points value. I got some store credit burning a hole in my pocket at my local game store, chat. Maybe we do buy a Tyrannifex. Maybe that is the way to go, Jonathan. Exocrines I'm a little bit worried about because they are 2 damage. It feels like this comes up every stream, but I'm also a little bit scared to play Exocrines because their count of stationary strat technically doesn't do anything. So I'm like, I don't know if that's a conversation I particularly want to have with my opponent, where it'd be like, hey, I'm going to use this stratagem. It doesn't do anything, but will you allow me to use it? Like, I don't want to do that. I did actually play them in some test games recently, playing some just like random Crusher Stampede stuff, and I specifically never used that stratagem, and oh boy, was that Exocrine not very good. At 155, though, it might be okay just sitting there. But the problem is I think the 2 damage is, like, you need to be D3 damage at least in order to have a chance of doing anything. The 2 damage is just not good enough. But like Tyrannifex is that the, oh man, is it like an acid spray Tyrannifex just the perfect delivery system for the Maliceptor synaptic link? Because it's the one where you don't feel the loss of bioweapon bonds because it acid sprays, and the reroll damage is a big deal. If you can get the 4d6 gunshots off, plus that extra AP on 6s, that's not bad. I don't know, chat. Maybe we're up in Tyrannocytes. Or Tyrannifexes, not Tyrannocytes. Shuma, I saw you talking about Tyrannocytes in there. When does the next 2.5S2 season start? External events, so events outside of the Tactical Tortoise Discord, have already started reporting. Pods will start next week. I basically... basically, we were holding off until the maps were ready, and then that ended up getting delayed, and then Warzone Knock Moon got a release date, which is this weekend, and so once it's released, we'll just start using that. So, ended up working out. It does mean the maps need to be redesigned slightly, but it's probably fine. Metabolic them up to the midboard turn once, them on a middle objective to 46 Flamer, yeah. I actually played the triple terrain effects list at the start of 9th edition. There might be some, I wonder if there's any stream games on the channel of that. There might be, actually. And that was the game plan. The problem is that, like, it just took so much work to get, like, one of them to deal damage, but now you're, like, -1 damage, and you've got an invulnerable save, and you're cheaper, and you've got all this stuff going for you. I bet a Terrain Effects is pretty solid. Not to mention the fact that that objective is, like, sucks to take back because you will flamer some people when they charge you. Yeah, okay. Maybe we play Terrain Effects this weekend, chat. Maybe we're doing it. Jonathan, you've been running it with your Maliceptor link and it always outperforms? All right, man. That sounds good. Let's give it a try. Let's give it a shot, chat. I'm in. Why not drop a Terrain Effects in a Tyrannocyte? You can. It doesn't get to double shoot when you do that is the problem. The strat doesn't work because Games Workshop edited it so it counts you as remaining stationary, not doesn't it in the past it counted you as not having moved, and the Exocrine ability to double shoot required you to not have moved in the movement phase. They edited the strat to now count you as remaining stationary, but remaining stationary is a type of movement. So in order to remain stationary, you would have to have moved. So it's like a semantic difference, but they are like in the rules. It's certainly an oversight, but the rules do view not having moved and having remained stationary as two separate states of being. And the ability requires one of them and the stratagem does the other one, basically. It's super stupid and sucks. Kenny the Wire wants to know when he can use the new towel rolls he's ready to cause the pain in the pods. It's when they are released. So next week, I guess, right? Or the week after next? Week after next. They are officially released. If I believe so. I believe is what's going on. It's safe on turn 1. Well, let me tell you, chat. If I have a 160-point monster that's toughness 8 with a 5+ invulnerable save and is in a Maliceptor aura, and my opponent wants to spend their entire turn killing that idiot, I'm fine with it. If all of the Tyrannocyte does is pull focus from all the rest of my army, or the Tyrannofex, excuse me, is pull focus from the rest of my army, like it's not 160 points worth of work. I think that's okay. The extra green gun's going to 8 shots and getting action don't move to get hit rerolls in the new codex. Maybe. That'd be weird. They have been trying weird stuff with actions. I don't know if I like the marker lights thing being an action. I think it's very strange. Samuel, am I going to put the new Vital Intelligence back into rotation? Yeah, I think everything's going to be out in the open until we kind of get a handle in on what the new missions look like. There's no sense in prejudging the new missions based on our experience with the old missions. That's stupid, because all the rules have changed. Jonathan, playing your first RTT this weekend. Awesome, dude. Congratulations on making it to an RTT. Hope you have a good time, man. Glad you're enjoying stuff and finding the videos helpful. The Storm Surge has an action to reroll. Okay. Does it reroll forever once it performs the action, or just that turn? I actually haven't read the Storm Surge. I read through a lot of that codex. There's some cool stuff. I have to say, I mean, like I said before, I appreciate that the Games Workshop design team is really like going out on a limb and experimenting with their new stuff. And I think stuff like the tactical philosophies giving you different, but giving units different but applicable abilities, you know, but relevant abilities, I think is super cool. I think the Devilfish is a good example, right? Either it gets a pregame move or it can strategic reserve for turn 1. And like those are both super good. The pregame move is good to play aggressively or to like go into cover and stuff like that. I mean, pregame moves are always good. And the redeploy is, you know, the strategic reserve is fine. I hope it's not broken, but I do like those abilities. I think the design space is cool. I hope that they're not just super busted. You do the action instead of moving, and then you get rerolls. Okay. All right. That seems fine. Anyway, chat, I think we'll probably go ahead and close out this Tactical Tuesday in a little bit. If anybody has any more questions and stuff, drop them in there. And remember, I guess I'll throw a redirect in here for the next stream. Just make sure I click on the right one. Yeah, we're gonna be streaming Death Guard versus Drukhari after this. So we'll set a redirect in there. So it'll send you to that stream. That'll be live in a couple hours after we finish this up. That's at 8 p.m. Eastern time. So 2 hours from right now. But yeah, that was my games from this weekend. Some thoughts on Crusher Stampede, some other stuff. Nah, Raze, you'll be fine. I believe in you, buddy. You just gotta do Mortal Wounds and stuff, you know? Just do Mortal Wounds. Run an OOP Call Carnifex list? OOP, like, out of production? Like, I have to play only the tiny Screamer Killers with the 4 little claws? So, yeah, chat. For those who are interested, keep taking a look at the T5S2 streams. We'll keep, as long as people keep watching them, we'll keep posting them on YouTube. Hope everyone who is watching those are enjoying them, and all the good games that are going into those. The finals, February 12th through 13th. Mark your calendars for that. That's going to be basically 2 full days of streaming some super duper sick games of 40k. Those are super good every season, so I'm super psyched about it. And yeah, I'm sure I'll have some more streams for y'all in the future. Some videos coming out this week, hopefully. Cross my fingers. Invitational's taken up a lot of my time, so the regular video content has been a little bit slow, but that's what's going on. I do have some topics planned. We do have some more Crusher Stampede to talk about, I think, before the new rules come out. Anyway, goodbye, everyone. I'm gonna sign off now. See ya.